You know how you have expectations going into a movie and it takes a severe left turn and it is completely surprising you? Ole Miss has a transfer right now that's kind of doing the same thing.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media at Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about two names that players are currently talking about as spring practice starts. And it may surprise you. We take a look at Keelon Russell, the SMU commit, because he's visiting all around the South, and he's been to Ole Miss twice. And Chris Beard has signed an extension after 20 games, won in year one. And Trayson Hughes has challenged Jackson Dart to a throwing contest after a SportsCenter top 10 level throw versus ULM. The Grove Collective are doing their March to Victory campaign this month. What does that mean? Well, it's a bracket-style tournament that pits regions of the country against each other in a March Madness type event. The goal is to raise $10 million over the course of the month and have 10,000 total members. The Sweet 16 ends March 18th. You can vote for your region right now. Let's keep Ole Miss athletics at the forefront and go to thegrovecollective.com/march to victory. Again, that's thegrovecollective.com/march to victory to help make that happen. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. All right, so spring practice is only two practices in, and we're at spring break right now, and we're trying to find different content to talk about. And one of the things I wanted to talk today about was transfers that have come in that have gotten the players' attention, not necessarily the fans' attention, not necessarily the big guys' attention either, because until they put on pads, you're not going to hear from Walter Nolan. You're not going to hear from Princely Monmielen. You're not going to hear from Nate Coleppo. That's not going to happen. So early on, the people that are going to impress are likely going to be skill position type players. And one player that came up unprompted whenever we interviewed Daquan Wright over the last weekend was Keelon Russell, the transfer from the Oklahoma Sooners. This is a safety back of the defense type player who, when he was at Oklahoma, he was a pretty good ball player. He was. 44 tackles, 2 interceptions, 3 passes defended. I think he also had the crazy pass interception in 2 years ago against Nebraska. That may not have been him, but I think that was him. Keelon Russell is a good player. He's going to be thought of to slot in next to potentially a Trey Washington as a strong safety type player. He's not a fifth defensive back type player. He's not a cornerback. I don't think he's a free safety. So that position that was like Dejon Anthony in 2023, that is the role that he's competing for. And he's competing against a lot of people. If you look at the back end of that defense, you have the returners like Trey Washington coming back, Jaden Kennedy, John Saunders. But you also have the new guys like Lewis Moore, Keelon Russell, the kid from South Alabama. I forgot his name real quick, so I apologize for that. Yam Banks. That's it. And all of that are going to be competing pretty heavily for 5 positions on the field. Keelon Russell is the one that stepped in to make the early impact. He came out swinging, and he's gotten the other players' attention on the field. Likely that's because of the way he moves around, how smooth he looks, and how athletic of a player he is when you're doing shorts and T-shirts type workouts. But they also have done some covering stuff in 7-on-7 and things like that away from spring practice. So whenever this player gets other players' attention, it's worth paying attention to, if that makes sense at all. Another player that we need to talk about is somebody we've talked about multiple times this week because of the standout level that he is at the moment. And that is Trey Amos, the cornerback out of Alabama. We've talked over and over again about his man coverage ability, and that is going to be the thing that gets him going at Ole Miss. Trey Amos, like I said, you look at his stats, 12 tackles, although he had 5 passes defended in a short period of time. Now, Trey Amos at Alabama backed up 2 potential first-round picks in this year's NFL draft in Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terry Arnold. Trey Amos was hand-selected by Nick Saban, and if everybody knows and everybody remembers, the Alabama defensive backfield is Nick Saban's baby. He handpicked Trey Amos and offered him a transfer spot, likely because of that elite man coverage ability. We talked about him when he was at Louisiana Lafayette. He was the alpha dog of that room, made all kinds of players. He was trying to build himself up to test himself and to work in that Alabama defensive backfield that everybody talks about. Nick Saban famously has gotten out of college coaching, which kind of left Trey Amos at a little bit of an impasse position. He ended up transferring to Ole Miss under Pete Golding, and he's going to be coached by Brian Brown, who has a reputation of being a ball hawk. So when you look at these defensive back players, you have B. Brown and Wes Neighbors as the coaches, but I'm going to talk about all 5 groups in a singularity. You have cornerbacks and safeties. They're going to be more ball centric. You're going to see an improvement in the defensive backfield, and a lot of it is going to come from the transfers that came in, but also what's being taught to them. It'll be interesting to see what B. Brown does with Amorian Walker over at corner, with Chris Graves over at corner, John Saunders and Jaden Kennedy in the slot corner type position, Yam Banks, who was a corner at South Alabama, but is probably going to be in line for either that 5th defensive back spot or at a strong safety or free safety if they back into that defense. Returners like Trey Washington will be absolutely huge. Remember, I said yesterday that if something goes wrong and Ole Miss doesn't accomplish their goals, where am I looking? What was the reason why? Where was the weak spot that was glaring? And I'm looking at the cornerback position other than Trey Amos. Now, I have nothing in my mind to say that that's actually a worry spot or something that people should pay attention to. But when you look at the Ole Miss players in the front 7 and the way the front 7 is going to be constructed, when you look at the back end of that defense with a quarterback, when you look at a player like Trey Amos lining up that is kind of plug and play self-sufficient, it's that other cornerback position that you're going to look at. And whenever you play teams on your schedule, LSU and Jaden Daniels kind of threw the ball at will against Ole Miss's secondary a year ago. Georgia, we all know what happened against Georgia. The second half against Texas A&M, they threw the ball up and down the field as well. So Ole Miss needed to have athletes who they recruited a year ago, but bring in elite style athletes that are at a higher level than the G5 level, which there's some G5 players that are good. This is not a Power 5 G5 type thing, because you can have 1 or 2 people that are from that background, but you don't want everybody to be from that background. John Saunders was a heck of a player. You know, Jaden Kennedy, Dejon Anthony. If you look at the back end of the defense, there were some standouts from the G5 level. That worked until it didn't. Ole Miss absolutely just beat the heck out of offenses that had mid to bad capabilities. But if you were a really good offense, you could kind of out-athlete this Ole Miss defense. And this Ole Miss defense has done what it could to bring in Power 5 starters, because these people have started at the Power 5 level. When you look at Key Lawrence at Oklahoma, Walter Nolan, Texas A&M, Princely Amon Mielen, Florida, Pooh Paul, Arkansas, starters at that level to bring in to raise the level of this whole defense. It should be interesting to see, and I'm pretty fired up about what it can be moving forward. So thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. The quarterback position for 2025 is going to be hotly debated for the next 6 months. The Rebels do have options, including a Lone Star State one. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we are going to pick one team that stands out, a team that has pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new Nissan 2024 SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Utah State Aggies are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with powerful performances against New Mexico that gave them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. They say win life, go rogue. And that's exactly what the Aggies have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada out and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV via the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. All right, so Ole Miss is looking for a quarterback in the 2025 class, and we've talked about Deuce Knight a couple of times, and he's still being recruited heavily. But there are other quarterbacks that are popping up as well that we need to pay attention to. One of which is Keelon Russell. He's a Southern Methodist commit. Florida and Ole Miss are still in the mix. The four-star quarterback has updated his recruited on 3 as from Chad Simmons. Now, if you look at Keelon Russell, the first thing you notice is that Ole Miss is developing a type at quarterback just like they have at running back, to where you can tell immediately that this is an Ole Miss level recruit. They're going after guys that fit the mold, like Jaden Daniels, like RG3. And those players are going to have to perform at their level for Ole Miss to have a shot. Now, SMU is hard in the NIL game, and one of the most fitting things ever since Native Americans got casinos, essentially. It's good to see SMU and what they went through be able to make money off of what they got accused of back in the day. SMU might not have been clean back in the 80s, but they were not the only not clean team in that time. It was a case of a little bit of selective enforcement, and they could have done the same thing at A&M or Texas or any of those schools as well. So it's good to see SMU being able to power a little bit in the NIL space. They got a commitment from Keelon Russell. He's a good quarterback. He just is. He's athletic. He's fast. He's got multiple 70-yard runs on the video that I have playing for everybody right now. He has multiple touchdowns to where he hit the receiver dead in stride. He does all the stuff you expect him to do, okay? And more. He is a different version of A.J. Maddox. He looks a lot like A.J. Maddox on the field. He honestly probably looks a little real similar to what an Austin Simmons would look like. Now, Jackson Dart, the athletic ability is there. Now, stylistically, it might look a little bit different, but you can see that Ole Miss recruits a certain type of quarterback, and that is the dual threat quarterback. They want a quarterback that can throw the football and throw it efficiently, but also has the legs to make the defense have to account for 11 players. And he's out of Duncansville, Texas, okay? And whenever you look at what he has going on, he's a consensus 4-star player. He's national 111 on each service. You know, On3 has him at 123, 247 has him at 63, ESPN has him at 212, and Rivals has him at 242. Pretty good stuff. Pretty much other than Rivals, he's a top 10 level quarterback. and he makes the plays that would a little bit warrant it. Since he is committed to SMU, everything is slanted towards SMU. But the fact that this recruit is still visiting, and he's visited Florida, and he has visited Ole Miss 2 times, that is something we need to pay attention to. He's a good football player. He really is. And we'll see how he goes. Remember, this time last year, Ole Miss was had a commitment from the kid from Arizona. 2 years ago, it was Marcel Reed. Neither one of them ended up at Ole Miss. So do not freak out about a quarterback not being on your roster on May 14th. It's just not worth it with the way recruiting goes at the moment. Now, one thing I want to talk about before I get out of here is Chris Beard has signed an extension with the University of Mississippi. And he's basically been extended for winning 20 games. And I think he won 7 SEC games this year. There were some flaws that were exposed, and a little bit of what happened to the Ole Miss football team in 2022 kind of reared its head at the end of the season when Ole Miss only beat Missouri twice. But Ole Miss getting to 20 wins is a major deal. There's going to be a difference from people that are disappointed in Ole Miss not making the NCAA tournament, but those same people, they cannot overarching look at this program and be disappointed in them, because this, under any metric, when compared to last season, was a successful year, and there's a build underway. Now, David Eckert, I looked on there. He said that this is not just a rollover, because sometimes in Mississippi, because of the 4-year contract law, there's rollovers in the contract. No, this is actually an extension, which is good news, because everybody was going to, come after Chris Beard. Not that he was going to go anywhere. I don't think that he was ever going to go anywhere, because after what Ole Miss did for him a year ago, I think Ole Miss is going to get repaid for that for a few years. That's just common sense tells me that. And Chris Beard signing the extension means he can go out to the transfer portal pretty much as soon as it opens up and bring people in and start building for 2025. We know that Jamin Brakefield is likely coming back. He said that on senior day or whatever, he has not played his last home game at Ole Miss. Whenever you look at other players on the roster, I think, Juju Murray has a chance to come back as well. Brandon Murray has a chance to come back as well. And then you're going to lose Alan Flanagan. You're going to lose Matthew Morrell. Now, Matthew Morrell was a really, really good football player that we have noted on this show many, many times. But Ole Miss needs to go in this window. I talked to Tim Thomas. Tim Thomas says Ole Miss needs a point guard, even if Juju Murray comes back, because he is essentially a 2-guard playing point guard. They need to find a real point guard, and they need to get some space eaters down low. Ole Miss at times looked like they were allergic to loose balls this season. They gave up 50 rebounds to Texas A&M this past weekend. So we'll see exactly how it goes. And tonight, Ole Miss plays Texas A&M. And I think, and this is just what I've heard over and over again, that even if offered, Ole Miss would not take an NIT berth. And I wonder out loud right now that if that's not the smartest move to make, because all the NIT would do, granted, you've got some games, but some of the core of that team is not going to be around next year anyway. But you're taking time away preparing for basketball games that you could be hitting the portal and doing what you need to do to build for next season. It's interesting to think about, but it's absolutely something that needs to be thought about if you want to be real about it. I mean, Ole Miss basketball is 100 million times away from where it was in 2022. The basketball season, Ole Miss was in the basketball season, and all the fan base was locked in till about February 20th, February 15th. At that point, they lost it. But the year before, didn't they get beat by UNA in November or something like that? just the sea change that has happened. Really, really interesting stuff. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coach Yo gets rewarded with a appointment of women's national team head coach. And Trayson Hughes, he's writing checks, and I don't know if his body can cash them. Anyway, stick around. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as a Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver constant supply of the latest videos of your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes us at Locked On and most of the big pro league and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep things all up to date on the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and more, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out the Fire TV Channels app on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV Channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. We have some more news to get to. Coach Yo has been named the head coach of the Bahamas women's national team for, I think, the next 3 or 4 years. I'm not 100% sure on the timeline, but that is pretty cool. Coach Yo has served in that capacity. I think 2014 to 2017 she had that post, but she is basketball in the Bahamas. She is Miss Basketball there, and I think her dad or something might be a fairly well-respected coach on the island as well. So congratulations to Coach Yo. Don't let it interrupt the Ole Miss Lady Rebs and all that good stuff. I know you won't. But it should be a whole lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing how Bahamas does in women's basketball. Now, moving on and changing the subject just a little bit, Trayson Hughes has challenged Jackson Dart. This is true. This is true. He says, "Hey, Dart, want to have a throwing competition?" Jackson Dart said, "Mine or yours," meaning which sport, and he said, "I'm good with either." This is an interesting, fun thing to think about. Trayson Hughes absolutely hosed a man against Louisiana Monroe on Tuesday night. It was SportsCenter top 10 play worthy, him hosing that man. But I do not know if Trayson Hughes wants to pick this fight. And this challenge, this is kind of like swinging for the big dog, because Jackson Dart, when he wants to, can whip the football And when you take away the football and turn it into a baseball, I imagine that Jackson Dart would throw somewhere in the 90s with a baseball. That is just my opinion. I've never seen it, but I would imagine it would be somewhere there. Now, he might not be able to place it. His aim might not actually be there. But if we're just talking about a hard throwing competition to where you don't necessarily have to worry where it's going, I'm going to go with the SEC level quarterback, even though Trayson Hughes, that was an absolute hose, man. You got tweeted by MLB's official baseball account about that play. That was a hose. That was awesome. But it's in a longest throw, or not a longest throw, just a throwing competition. I don't know if this is a challenge you want to make. Now, the flip side of that is, I don't know if I'd want Jackson Dart in that competition for, like, what if Jackson Dart hurt his elbow and needed Tommy John surgery because of a baseball throwing competition? Yeah, so let's lay off of that, but I still think Jackson Dart would win that as well. Now, if you think about other players that have kind of stood out that you would like to see throwing competitions of, I would have liked to see Matt Corral throw a baseball. I'd like to see a radar gun on Matt Corral. I'd like to see AJ Brown where he threw it whenever he was in the minor league system, by the way, of the San Diego Padres. I'd like to see what he did with the radar gun on him as well. Obviously, all of these throws would be with a baseball, but it would be interesting to see. Now, in the comment section below, do me a favor. Put on there who you would like to see from Ole Miss football pass throw a football, or throw a baseball, I should say, and have a radar gun with TrackMan statistics and all of that on it. You can't say Seth Smith. You can't say Sinquez Golson. You can't say John Rice Plumlee, because we've seen those. A player that you haven't seen, who would you like to see throw a baseball that's from Ole Miss football player past? That's just a random thing that I've thought of, and I don't know. It'd be kind of cool to see. I would like to think that Jackson Dart could probably get into the 90s fairly comfortably throwing a baseball. Just my opinion on that. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. Every dayers, we are going to have a weird schedule. Starting today, I'm going to see a baseball game, the Detroit Tigers and the New York Yankees. Tomorrow's the Detroit Tigers and the Atlanta Braves. I'll be there. So which means my recording schedule is a little bit messed up this week. We have 2 videos per day planned for each day. But if something goes wrong, they might not be there. So thank you for your patience, and we'll see how it goes. Your second listen of the day, Locked On, has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available for free on Fire TV's channel app. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.